Good morning, Dan and Amy. Well, the fallout from last week's shooting continues. And updating Steve Scalise's condition, the House Majority Whip, in case you didn't see it, upgraded from critical to serious.
Which is good news.
That's good news. Also, the Capitol Hill officers that returned fire and ultimately killed the would-be assassin being hailed properly as heroes. But then, politics intervenes. And Joy Reid, MSNBC, with Reverend William Barber, who is an NAACP board member, on the shooting. Listen to this.
Obviously, everybody is wishing the congressman well and hoping that he recovers. But Steve Scalise has a history that we've all been forced to sort of ignore on race. He did come to leadership after some controversy over attending a white nationalist event, which he says he didn't know what it was. He also co-sponsored a bill to amend the Constitution to define marriages between a man and a woman. He voted for the House health care bill, which, as you said, would gut health care for millions of people, including 3 million children. And he co-sponsored a bill to repeal the ban on semi-automatic weapons. Because he is in jeopardy and everyone is pulling for him, are we required in a moral sense to put that aside at the moment?
What we're required to say is we hope he recovers, and then when he recovers, there's a renewed mindset. If a lesbian person saved your life, you should not go forward, being homophobic. You shouldn't be it anyway. If you almost died, but your life was saved because you got health care, then you should apply that ethic and want everybody else the same health care you have.
So
homophobic? Okay.
The only way that Steve Scalise can, truly recover in the mind of the left is to become one of them. So again, playing politics with people's lives and talking about their well wishes for Scalise's recovery, but there's a but. There's a but. And this is Kellyanne Conway on Fox and Friends over the weekend talking about social media and the barbarism that is laying just below the surface among some segment of the population that has been brought out by Trump antipathy. And leading Kellyanne Conway to suggest this.
As Steve Scalise was fighting for his life and crawling into right field in a trail of blood, you should go back and see what people were saying about the president and the Republicans at that very moment. Of course, they had to break in with the news of this tragedy, and since then there's been some introspection, some quieter, more muted voices toning down the rhetoric. But look at Twitter. If I were shot and killed tomorrow, half of Twitter would explode in applause and excitement. This is the world we live in now, and it's terrible because it's one thing to say I disagree with you on health care repeal or on taxes or on your plan for national security, but you can't attack people personally in a way and think that tragedies like this won't happen.
Well, I may challenge the last part of what she said, but in terms of the first part, the idea that if she were shot and killed, half of Twitter would applaud, and that's the society we live in today. She may be onto something. Let's get more. We're pleased to be joined by Republican Congressman from southern and up into central Illinois, Rodney Davis, Taylorville, who was at bat when the shooting started last week. Rodney, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, Dan and Amy, thanks for having me on.
So just tell us, what happened. What happened that day? Give us your first-person perspective.
Sure. Well, I was up to batting practice, and heard a loud noise after I had a pitch just thrown to me, and I thought it was a large piece of metal being dropped from a construction site, and I wondered where it was at because it was a very loud noise. And the next words I heard were from one of my colleagues or someone else on the field. Said, "Run, he's got a gun." And I ran, dove in the first base dugout, then eventually worked my way out of that dugout over behind a building where I saw the heroes, Crystal Griner and David Bailey, the Capitol Police, firing back and engaging this individual, even Agent Griner while she was down on the ground. And while they were doing that, I took the opportunity to run for better cover across the street and eventually into an apartment of a Good Samaritan.
Well, who were you with? Were you alone or were you with other congressmen when you were fleeing for your life?
I mean, everybody on that field was fleeing for their lives, so every single person that you've seen in reports that was there that day were all doing what we were doing, which was trying to get away from a madman who hunted us and stalked us. Obviously, as the evidence is playing out for a long time before he perpetrated this attack.
Yeah, you had what you're referring to in part is this report that he had a hit list to this would-be assassin that included Representative Mo Brooks, South Carolina Congressman Jeff Duncan, Trent Franks from Arizona, also Ohio Rep. Jim Jordan, Tennessee Rep. Scott DeJarlis, and Virginia Rep. Morgan Griffith on the list. All six congressmen are members of the House Freedom Caucus. So that was a story out over the weekend as well. And
yeah, he obviously had another list in his head because he shot at those of us who were not on that list.
Sure.
And I got to tell you, this is the problem we have today in politics, and you alluded to it in your last, before you came into this segment with me. This is about people believe that they can settle their political differences outside the ballot box. They don't want to accept election results, and they certainly don't want to accept policy differences after the elections don't go their way. And that's not what we are here in America. We've got to be able to continue to have that debate, that spirited debate over policy differences. But let's not let it get personal. You know as well as I do, I got a lot of Democratic friends, both here in Illinois and out in Washington, those I served with. We would never think about resorting to what all of us had to go through the other day.
Were you surprised that he was able to live in his van near that area? I mean, he was there for a few months and nobody did anything about it.
I don't know enough about the area to know whether or not that would have been a surprise, Amy. My interaction with Alexandria, Virginia, is waking up at 5:15, 2 months out of the year, and hitching a ride to go over there and practice baseball for a game that raises hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now, after this year, raises millions of dollars for local D.C. charities.
And I've seen you swing a bat, and you need the practice. There's no question about that. Here's a.
Oh, come on, Adam.
Dan, too soon. We won't ask what your batting average is.
But just going back to that day, when you were in that first base dugout, what were you seeing? And so what was the circumstances? You're there seeking cover, and then it's clear enough for you to find other refuge. How did that all go down?
And I'll be honest with you, buddy, I didn't see anything. I never saw the shooter.
Okay.
As soon as I heard the words "run," he's got a gun, I dove into the dugout. I landed on top of one or two more people that were closer to the dugout and got there before me, even though I figured I probably could have beaten Carl Lewis in the 100 from home plate to dugout. The dugout's sunken, but I immediately knew I got to find a way to get out this one entrance. And the one entrance was the gate that would come in on the first base side right by the dugout. So I worked my way through that dugout and out that gate. And as I made it out there, I crouched behind the building, behind the SUVs, watching Agent Greiner and Agent Bailey defend us and protect us because they're heroes. And I looked to my right, I saw Steve Scalise down, what I thought was motionless in the field. I saw Matt Micah probably 10 feet in front of me, laying on the ground on the concrete behind the dugout with blood all over his chest, lying on his back, holding his chest. When Agent Bailey and Agent Greiner continued to engage, that's when I took a chance to run across the road and get behind some cars for some better cover. And then as the firing came around the corner closer, someone said he's coming around the corner. That's when three of us ran into the apartment of a Good Samaritan who opened his door, said, "Come on in."
And how long?
I called 911, and I called my wife.
Okay. And how long? Yeah, that's where I was going. How long did it take for reinforcements for those two Capitol Hill police officers to arrive?
Reports say that Alexandria police responded in about 3 minutes, and I wouldn't know. I mean, I've never been in a situation like this, but I didn't hear any sirens. Frankly, the only gunshots I remember hearing besides those that I watched Agent Bailey fire and Agent Griner fire are the one that I didn't know was a gunshot, the first one, and then the second one, because I knew something was terribly wrong.
Has the magnitude of this sunk in yet? And do you think you'll be changed as a person, always looking over your back since you're a congressman?
Well, obviously, it changes you once you're through it. Do I feel much different? No, I feel pretty normal. The irony is I'm probably less agitated and more patient with those around me that know and love me the most. And I'm probably a little more agitated and less patient with those who want to just turn politics into their own religion. And that's where we are as a country. We've got to say no to this. I mean, this what we witnessed the other day was truly an act of what I call political terrorism. This man, this maniac, which makes me nauseous, he's from our home state. Yeah. He came to a field, he stalked us, and he did it for political purposes. He turned his politics into his religion, and that makes him no different than anybody else who hijacks their religion to try and use it as a reason to indiscriminately kill, or in this case, thankfully, try to kill innocent people.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to describe it, the idea of politics as religion. And Ross Douthat had a good piece in the New York Times over the weekend, too, why this is more frightening than other acts in this vein, whether it's presidential assassination attempts like John Hinckley or others, Sirhan assassinating Bobby Kennedy, because this is somebody who had and the Belleville News-Democrat publishing the letters to the editor that he wrote. This is somebody who obviously was full of rage, but otherwise there was no history of mental illness. He is he was not a conspiracy theorist. He just didn't like Trump. He didn't like Republicans. He wanted, tax increases on the wealthy and other sort of pedestrian positions that the left takes. But it wasn't somebody who was tangentially connected to reality, and that makes it all the more frightening.
Well, there's nothing more frightening that I could ever imagine that I will ever have to personally experience again in my life, and I hope and pray no one does.
Let me ask you this, Rodney, because there's been some calls for, just in the wake of this, you're going to have public policy responses or at least suggestions too. One is increased security for members of Congress. Two is because the only reason those Capitol Hill police officers were there was because Scalise was there. That's even more frightening. What would have happened? Yeah, what would have happened? And then secondly, a suggestion of reciprocity for right to carry, so that members of Congress who have concealed carry permits in their home state or open carry permits in their home state can carry in D.C. What do you say to both of those suggestions?
This is a debate, Dan, that we're going to continue to have, and it's a debate that I think we ought to have. Obviously, after what I personally experienced, and those who were with me experienced, we're going to rethink some of the situations we put ourselves and our family into. It's not going to be a coincidence that I'm going to probably prioritize security a lot more than I had, not only in Washington, but also back home in the district, because obviously we took it for granted. When we walked into a baseball field with one entrance unlocked, and stood on that field for an hour in the mornings to practice, because we took for granted that we were going to be able to leave that field just as easily as we got there. But last Wednesday showed that wasn't the case, and we've got to take that into consideration. Look, I'm somebody who's trained to carry a concealed weapon. I believe that law-abiding citizens ought to have the right to defend themselves, and that's going to be part of the debate that I know I'm going to engage in as we move forward.
Well, we're happy for you and for your family that you did run away from that baseball field. And he is Congressman Rodney Davis, Republican from Taylorville, Illinois. Rodney, thanks so much for joining us, and be safe out there. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks, Dan and Amy. Take care.
You too. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.